It's your girl, Trish. I hope everyone's having an amazing day. First, I need to do a sound check, make sure you guys can hear me because we've had some technical difficulties. All right, let's see here. Hello, hello, welcome. Let me know if you guys can hear me just fine. Testing, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in to the interview with your girl, Trish. I am super excited to be with you guys live on today. Happy Fabulous Thursday to you. I hope you guys are moving and shaking, doing all that God has destined for you. On today, y'all, we are supposed to have a special, very special guest. My girl, Prophetess LaShonda Jones, was supposed to be with us. We had some serious technical difficulties where we could not get her on. So I had to go forth on the interview by myself today, but it's okay. I know y'all know that God is still up to something big. The enemy tried to block it, but the enemy will not be able to stop what God is doing in this season. So that's a word in itself, okay? So if you find yourself struggling in any area where you feel like if it ain't one thing, it's another. The enemy is trying to stop you, block you on every hand. You got to keep that thing moving. You know, my favorite saying is keep it moving, Susan, because we got work to do. We got things that we need to see manifest in this season like never before. So once again, thank you so much for tuning in with your girl, Trish. It's time for the interview, y'all. And I got some little nuggets that I got to share with y'all on today, okay? Because there's so much that God is doing in this season, and we have to make sure that we are prepared, that we are in position for next, that we're doing everything that God has given us to do for such a time as this, that we go out and we win on purpose and with purpose in the name of Jesus, okay? So, if you're watching me, please make sure to share this. Tag your best friend, tag your girlfriend. I'm only going to be on here for a minute just to drop some nuggets in your ear to empower you, encourage you, and strengthen you to get to the next level of being who God has called and destined you to be, okay? So, with that being said, y'all see my little title up here. It's called It's Time for Next. In my church, y'all know I am the executive pastor serving alongside my fabulous husband, senior pastor, Derek Morissette. And we have been talking about what's next, okay? So I'm going to give you some food for thought, some words of encouragement that we have been sharing at our church, that Pastor Derek has been giving us, that God has just really been putting in my spirit to charge you, because God is up to something super big and super amazing. And I'm telling you, with the season that we're in, so much heaviness, so much chaos, so much destruction, depression, anxiety, fears, that the enemy is doing everything that he can to stop the next level of who God has called you to be for such a time as this. So I want to encourage you right here, right now, that whatever it is that, listen, you don't have time to mildew, but you got time to barbecue, okay? No time for meal doing, but we got to barbecue. That means that we got to still cook up something good in the kitchen, even when we don't feel like we got all the ingredients. Come on, somebody. Even when we don't feel like we got all the supplies, the pots, the pan. God is saying you got to work with what you got until you're able to get what you want. What's next depends on what you're doing in your now. So I want to encourage you to take a look in your house. See what you got, because God is saying there is something in your house that you could use to be a blessing, not just to you, but also to others as well. I think about Elijah when he went into the widow's house, and she was like, you know what? All I got is this, this, and this. You're talking about a little flour, a little oil, okay? And she said, man, my son, we're going to eat it and we just going to die. And God is saying, what's in you is not supposed to just be used one time and let it die, let it fall to the wayside. God is saying, go back Go back into your pantry. Go back into your cabinet, your refrigerator. There are some things that you got to pull out right now that is going to position you for another level of greatness. All right. But it's what you do in your now, what you pull out now, that's going to allow the manifestation of what's going to happen next. Some of us are looking in our pantries, our cabinets, our refrigerator, and saying, oh, well, I only have this, or I don't have that. Now, I'm not talking about a literal pantry, refrigerator, or cabinet, but I'm talking about within you, within your marriage, within your bank account, within your business, within whatever that refrigerator, pantry, or cabinet is for you. I really want you to think about that, because some of us are looking at what we have now and putting it off because you don't realize the value of what's inside. But God is saying there is something in your now that you're overlooking, and you're missing out on what God is trying to do for your next. Okay. So God is saying what happens next for you is dependent upon what you do right here and right now. What you do right here and right now. Some of us are feeling like we need to walk away from something or someone, or just forget about something. But God has really put a passion and a desire on the inside of you for a reason. You have got to be intentional about getting to your next. Some of us have become lazy about next. Some of us have put next to the wayside, on the back burner. But God is saying, listen, sons and daughters, you've got to be intentional about your next. That means that you got to be intentional about doing some things right here, right now, so that you can see the next manifestation of your harvest. See, you got to understand that when God plants something on the inside of you, it's not meant to be buried and not cultivated. When God puts something on the inside of you like a seed, you are the farmer to that seed. You have to cultivate the little seed that is there so that it can bring forth the big harvest. But here's the thing, you have to be intentional about cultivating the little so that it can manifest into the lot. If you're not intentional, if you're being lazy, if you're being fearful, if you're being doubtful, if you're allowing anxiety to get the best of you, situations and circumstances, then that lets God know that you're not taking care of the little that's supposed to manifest into a lot. There is so much that God is trying to do in this season, in this time, in this hour. But what he needs is somebody that's not scared, somebody that's not allowing the enemy to get the best of you mentally, spiritually, emotionally. Listen, I've been there. I know what that looks like when you allow the enemy to get the best of you mentally, spiritually, emotionally. It feels like you're losing. It feels like you're suffocating. It feels like you're not in the game. It feels like you're not winning. But God is saying that is a trick of the enemy, because that is a part of the process. The process lets us know that oftentimes it seems like we're going nowhere. Just ask the children of Israel when they were in that in-between place from Egypt into Canaan. It seemed like they were going nowhere and nowhere fast, because it took them way longer, 40 years, to get to somewhere that should have took anywhere from 9 to 11 days. So it looked like they were going nowhere fast. But you got to understand that a lot of times when it seems like we're going nowhere fast, what happened with the children of Israel, where they began to get fearful, they began to get doubtful, they began to murmur and complain about not seeing manifestation. And sometimes we get caught up in what's not there, that we don't even realize what is there, right? And so God is saying, realize what is there and be intentional about using what is there, because there is something in your now that needs cultivating for your next, right? A lot of times that's our mindset. Like, we have got to change our minds in this season because we know that if we change our minds, the way our that stinking thinking, emotional thinking, that soulish thinking, right? Because we know that our soul is our mind, our will, our intellect. That's where our emotions hide, and in our soul. And so God is saying we have to be intentional about checking our soul. And that's one of the things I had to step back and I was like, okay, my soul is everywhere, meaning my emotions. Because one minute you're high, the next minute you're low. The one minute you got it going on, the next minute it's like, what we doing, God? Like, God, what's going on? The world is in chaos. Finances are in chaos. Job is this. We got hurricanes. We got wildfires. We got COVID-19. So one minute you can have this supernatural high, but then the next minute you look at your surroundings, you look at your environment, and you're like, what's really going on? Because I don't understand 2020. A lot of people are not understanding 2020. It's not for you to understand. 2020 is for you to cultivate. See, we get this mixed up. We think, okay, I don't get 2020. 2020 is the hardest year, whatever. 2020 is a seed for next. I'm gonna say that again. 2020 this year is a seed for next, right? What you're supposed to be doing in 2020 is putting seed in the ground. What you're supposed to be doing in 2020 is analyzing and cultivating 2020 so that when you come out of 2020, you have a harvest waiting on you. But many people are looking at like 2020, I'm ready for 2021. But if you're not cultivating anything in 2020 now, you're going to see the same old, right? In 2021. God is saying that many of us are not taking advantage of what 2020 is supposed to bring. 2020 is the year that we would see things that we've never seen before. That was one of the things that I had prophesied last year, that we were going to see things that we've never seen before, experience things that we've never experienced before. 2020 is that time where you're supposed to experience things like never before. It's the time where you're supposed to step out on faith. It's the time where you're supposed to trust God, because when you trust God, there is another level of seeing that you've never before seen, because faith cometh by hearing by the word of God. So as a man thinketh, so is he. So as you cultivate faith, as you cultivate your trust in God, 2020 is that year of cultivation. It's that year where you're supposed to be putting seed in the ground. You're supposed to be putting faith in the ground. You're supposed to be putting your anointing, your gifts, your talents in the ground, meaning that you're supposed to be using them so that they can produce a harvest for next year. But a lot of us, what we're putting in the ground is frustration. We're putting in the ground anxiety. We're putting in the ground fear, doubt, disbelief. And so when we put that in the ground, what we end up doing is we end up cultivating it. And then it produces a harvest that we don't really want. And so we're like, God, well, what is going on? God said, those that come to God must first believe that he is. Well, what does that scripture mean in Hebrews chapter 11? When we come to God with our COVID issues, with our financial issues, with our relationship issues, we can't come to God doubting that he can't change it. It says those that come to God must first believe that he is, meaning that he is the one that could change the relational issue that you have, the relationship, whether it's a marriage or feeling lonely and not having that mate, or whether it's the issue with COVID-19, your health, your mindset. When you come to God, you got to first believe that he is the one that can change the situation. You can't come to God doubting that he is. You got to come to God knowing that he is. You got to not allow circumstances and situation make you think that he isn't who he says he is, that he can't do what he says that he can do. But God is saying, you come to me, you got to first know in advance that I got the power to win. Matter of fact, it's already won. Winning, and you just got to meet up. Come on, somebody. Winning, and you got to meet up and marry, because there is something in you that's causing you to not feel like you've won in a particular area because you don't see manifestation in that particular area. But God is saying it's already there. You just got to meet up with the promise of you winning. God is saying it's impossible to please him without faith. Many of us are not having enough faith in this hour to win. I'm going to say that again. Many of us are not having enough faith in this hour to win. We give up or we give in too soon. And so, or we put it off and we say it's not the season, it's not the time. Well, if not now, then when? If not you, then who? You know that famous saying, right? And so you got to understand that God is saying he needs you to meet up with the win. He needs you to meet up with the promise. He needs you to meet up with what is next. But in order to do that, you got to be intentional about doing it. You cannot let sight discourage you. You cannot let the world bring fear upon you. You can't let COVID-19 distract you. You can't let all of this. Now listen, we see it, we understand it, we know that things are happening. But if I focus on what I can only see, I will miss out on what's coming. Vision is all about horizon, what's on the horizon, what's coming next. Vision is all about beyond sight. So if you can see beyond it, then you can receive beyond it. Okay, so you got to be intentional and you got to have the right people in your corner that are cheering you on, that are saying, girl, you got this. You got this. You got this. You got to have the right people cheering you on in this season. We're in a heavy season. You got to have somebody that can encourage you and strengthen you when you're in a low place. Okay, we've all been there. Y'all heard me. Those that follow me know that I got testimony after testimony of how I've come from out of a low place of depression and frustration with God to having faith like never before to see harvest. And listen, this season, nobody is exempt, okay, from heaviness. Nobody is exempt from COVID-19. That COVID-19 is raining on the just as well as the unjust. Nobody is exempt from racial injustice. If you're of color, that doesn't mean that you can't experience or you won't know somebody that isn't experiencing it. We're not exempt from the heaviness of what's going on. The thing is that we can't let the heaviness have us. We can't let depression have us. We can't let loneliness have us. We can't let fear have us. It's happening, but it doesn't have to happen all the time with us. We got to fight to get out of the pit so we can make it to the palace. That's what's next for you. And I got to encourage you that you are called and anointed to get through this season. You are called and anointed to plant seeds in this season that's going to cultivate a dynamic year for next year. But we got to understand what happens next depends on what you do now. Shoot, you might even be cultivating seed now that may spring up before the end of this year. But if you don't do what God is telling you to do, chances are you're going to miss out on the next big thing that God has for your life. We have got to encourage ourselves. We have got to encourage others. We have got to have people that we're accountable to that can help us when we're weak. They help us to become strong. We have to look in so that we can be better out. But I like to say, check yourself or you wreck yourself, okay? Because if you don't do a self-check, then I'm telling you, your emotions are going to check you. Your frustrations are going to check you. If you don't learn to begin to check things that are coming against you, that are challenging you, that are frustrating you, if you don't start checking it, it will check you. If you don't check the depression, depression will check you. If you don't check financial disparity, it will check you. So you got to figure out what it is that you have to do to see the next move of God in your life. Ask God questions. I ask God questions all the time. Who has my next? Where is it, God? What decision? Where should I go from here? Who should I connect with, God? Who should I disconnect with? God, what thought was that thought of you or was that me? So you gotta begin to ask God questions because asking God questions can change your life, change your destiny, because the enemy will make you think something is God and it ain't God. The enemy is so good at disguising himself as light. And so what seems like is good, what seems like is light, what seems like is prosperous, it really isn't. but it's the enemy in disguise, because he's trying to pull you over yonder, because he knows if he pulls you over yonder, you'll never get there where God intended for you to be. So I'm challenging you to recognize distractions in this season. Recognize what your distractions are. Ask God questions like, God, is this a distraction for me? Or is this really what I'm supposed to be doing, saying? Is this where I'm supposed to be? You got to ask God those hard questions. And when I say hard, they're hard because you may not have a true understanding of what God is doing. Now, when you ask God questions, sometimes your answer doesn't come immediately. Sometimes he'll give you confirmation through somebody else the next day, something you hear on television. But listen, we got to ask God some hard questions in this season, because we're looking for an even greater level of where he's taking us. And in order for us to get to that even greater level, we got to be intentional about asking questions. We got to be intentional about connecting with the right people. We got to be intentional about disconnecting with the wrong people. We got to be intentional about disconnecting from emotions that are not like God. We got to be intentional about letting go of fear. We got to be intentional about letting go of anger and bitterness and unforgiveness of the people that have hurt us, the people that have rejected us. We have got to be intentional. 2020, this is your year of planting seeds so that you can see harvest after harvest. Many of us are looking at it, it's like, oh, it's a dud. This is a dud year. Like, this year ain't about nothing. I'm telling you, this is the year of blessings like never before. Now, as a whole, when we look at the world, we look at the nation, as a whole, God is trying to tell the world something. Yeah. And we will be foolish to not recognize that God is trying to get our attention. But on an individual level, if God is trying to get your attention and let you know that there are some things that you need to change, there are some directions that you need to take, there are some things that you need to cultivate. If God is trying to get your attention to let you know that, then it's up to you if you're going to pay attention or not, because God is trying to do something phenomenal in your life. But you got to show God and prove to God that, God, I'm listening. God, I hear you. God, you're moving. God, you're speaking. And God, I'm not going to turn a deaf ear to you. I'm going to pay attention to what you're saying. Your purpose is waiting for you to line up and get in position. Your purpose is waiting on you to get in position. Your seeds are waiting on you to cultivate them. So I just want to encourage you on today that your next is waiting on you, girlfriend. Your next is screaming, get your mind right. We got work to do. God is looking at you and saying, don't forget who I am. Don't forget who I called and destined for you to be. And don't forget that when you come to me in your frustration, don't forget who I am, that I am the God of the impossible, that what seems impossible right now is not too hard for me. God is saying, don't forget who I am, and don't forget who I called you to be for such a time as this. All right, guys, that's the interview with your girl, Trish. And I just pray that something was said today to help you get your whole life, okay? Thank you so much for tuning in. And listen, share this broadcast with somebody who missed it and need to hear that it's time for next.